Last thing I think we said was that the soul root, which descends down, is higher than the angels. Okay.
Let's do a quick summary.
Of what we saw so far. We had the analogy between. First question was, why is the land of Canaan not called the land of Canaan in the Parsha of Libations? That's the first question. To answer that, he says there's an analogy drawn in Brachos between a person who reads Kriyas Shema without Tefillin and someone who brings a korban without Nesachim. Okay, so the question is, what's the analogy? Why is Kriyas Shema like a sacrifice? And why is a libation like Tefillin? What's the analogy exactly? So we spent some time talking about the land of Canaan being a place that's easily submissive. It leads to submission to Hashem, meaning being able to take the animal soul and submit it to Hashem. And then we said,
so the land is technically different from other countries?
Okay. Technically, I don't know technically.
Spiritual. Why are all the goyim attracted? Why were certain goyim kings not claiming a piece of part of the country?
Everybody wants to serve Hashem. You just don't know how.
How come the goyim?
Of course they want to. You see that everything in the world, again, what is God? It might not be the comfortable, again, it's the comfortable God they want to serve. The comfortable God means the one that serves their purposes. But everybody needs to have a feeling that there's something beyond them giving them legitimacy for what they do. Okay?
Even ISIS and all this group?
Of course, that's why they believe in. That's why they claim to believe in something. No, a person needs some form of belief in order to hold everything together.
And Yom Shimon.
Also,
Nazis
same.
in Germany.
Of course, they believed in a lot of things. They had a very pagan belief in God. They had a very earthly belief, I would call it. And everybody believes. You can blame Avram for this, or you can blame idolatry for this. I don't know who to blame exactly. But everybody has some form of belief. There's very few people that don't have a form of belief. Atheists are very few and far between.
I swear to God I'm an atheist.
What?
You never heard that expression? I swear to God I'm an atheist.
Oh yeah, something like that. Because people don't have the ability to stand. Psychologically, they don't have the ability to stand there on their own 2 feet. So
They have no nefesh elokis, they have a nefesh bahamis.
settled. The nefesh bahamis also needs something to stand on, or to stand under, and to feel
The
the.
nefesh bahamis so wants something to stand on, something to hold on. Why is our nefesh bahamis trying to move us away from the nefesh elokis? Why is it trying to stop us doing this?
It's not. It's not trying to stop you from it. It's trying to protect you. It's not like it's against Torah. If Torah would align with what the beliefs of the animal soul were, it wouldn't have an issue with it. The animal soul has beliefs. Stay alive. It's important to stay alive. Yeah, it's important to stay alive. So it comes out as adrenaline. Yeah. It doesn't see even that by giving you adrenaline, it's slowly killing you. It doesn't see the effect of stress. It's interesting.
That's why you have times when you get something, the nefesh doesn't interfere with what you want.
Right. When it feels that it's not.
It was a threat.
Yeah, it's not a threat. It doesn't. To go to shul once in a while, even to relieve stress by learning, that's fine. It's not a big deal. You'll live longer even. But the real stuff, the stuff that requires sacrifice, it won't allow you. It will fight very hard against. So, in any case, so every human being has this need. The moment that people understood this, they started becoming anti-religion. It took a long time for people to see this. Even the intellectuals, it took them a long time to figure out that they needed Christianity, for instance. They needed it. And they didn't like it when they realized that they needed it. So they got rid of it, and they fought against it. What were they fighting for? They were fighting for their independence. So it goes together. When people fought for their independence, as it were, in France, they were also fighting against the church at the same time. They were being atheists, right? Because the republic that was created was atheist. They had a new calendar. They started from year 1, from the year of the revolution, 1789.
Don't do it now.
They threw it out eventually, but not because they don't think it was holy and good. But they were very, very anti-religious also. It goes together. It always goes together. That's why the Alter Rebbe was very afraid of Napoleon. He said that the Yiddishkeit would suffer if these ideals, which sound great on the face of it, of freedom and liberty and fraternity and equality, if these ideals would become, if they would affect the Jewish people. Because you realize that these are survival instincts. They're not, they have nothing, there's no idealism behind them. There's very little idealism behind it, I should put it that way. They're a way of trying to be free from God and putting it in a certain packaging. Yeah, putting it in a certain packaging. And then the God you end up with is, okay, I mean, you can't say that this isn't God at all, but it's missing some of the key ingredients. And anything that requires you to go beyond the call of duty is cast out. Yeah. Something like that. Something like that. In the end, you suffer from it a lot more than if you wouldn't. It's not to say that the system with the monarchs was any good. It was terrible also. Yeah. But at least, the way the Alter Rebbe saw it, there was a commitment to something, and not Isha Yashar Ben Avi Yaseh, and not that every person would decide for himself.
I always thought it was the fact that there was oppression means the Jews want to cling to God, save them from the oppression, from the oppression.
But also probably an important ingredient in that mix. So then we saw that the reason the Kriyas Shema is the same as bringing a korban is because the fire comes from above. And in a korban, the fire descends from heaven and it burns the offering. The same thing, when you say Kriyas Shema, then something is descending, because you didn't invent this, and you didn't come to it by your own devices. What does it say about Avram? Hitzitz alav melech malchei amlachim. Hashem has to show himself to you. So for us it's easy. We have a Chumash, it says in the Chumash, Ma'aseh Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, just in case you can't find it in Deuteronomy 4:6. So 6:4. So came the sages and they put it into davening. They made a mitzvah out of it, and they said you have to say this twice a day, just in case you can't find it. Everyone knows it by heart. And you say it before you die, and all these things, and now everybody knows this verse. The verse came down from heaven. That's where it came from. So it's like lighting a fire inside you. What's the fire? The fire is that there's only Hashem. Right? That's a fire. It's a consuming fire. It's an all-consuming fire of faith in the person. So it's like a korban. So as it says, this fire that comes down, it's strong enough to contain, like we saw last week, all the fires from below. It's like esh ochla esh. It's the fire that consumes all the other fires. What are the other fires? All the needs that you have from your animal soul, all the material needs that you have a passion for, that you want to. Like you said, that whenever you feel that this fire comes down, it's time to add to the flame by taking all of your other fires and connecting them to this and saying, this is really my passion. This is really what I want. Making a big fire out of it. And then he says that even though the angels, well, then he discussed the angels. He said the angels are more simple than man. The man is made out of all 4 elements, and the angels are made of only one element, each one a different element. And that's why on the one hand they're eternal, or at least close to eternal. They're far more well, how would you call it? Far more robust than a human being is. They stay for a longer time, like a stone. On the other hand, they're also much simpler because they can only entertain one thought.
Angels die?
They are consumed, but they're not eternal. They're not Hashem. So then he says, so on the one hand, because they have this one thought, because they burn up in their knowledge of God, and all they have is like a burning passion for God Himself. Still, man is higher. Why is man higher? Because even though the soul is a composite, it's more complex, it comes from a higher place. So that's where we left off last time. וזהו אף אגב דיהו לא חזה, מזלה חזה. פירוש מזלה מלשון ניזל מים, והיינו שורש נשמתו למעלה, שממנו נוזל ונמשך הערתו למטה. That's what it means, that even though the person himself can't see, his mazel sees. Okay? What does it mean the person himself can't see? There's certain spiritual things that even though I can't see them with my senses, I do have some inkling of them. How do I get the inkling of them? They don't come from my senses. It comes from like something flowing down from above. And mazla, this mazel that we're talking about, it comes from the word meaning to flow. Yizal mai midolyo.
Not the same as mazal, no.
Yeah, same. Mazal. Mazal means flowing down. When you say things are dependent on mazel, you're saying they're dependent on something from above that governs them. It's not just what they have, like a Sefer Torah, right? So Sefer Torah is talui b'mazal. Even the Sefer Torah is what's the mazel? There's many things about the mazel, but the main thing that we said is whether or not it's read from during the year, okay? Whether it's opened and somebody reads from it, that's already mazel. Why? Because the Sefer Torah itself can't open itself. It doesn't have the ability to open itself, as important as it is, as holy as it is. And it can't read itself. So it's dependent on somebody having an awakening and deciding to read from it. I once explained that really means whether or not it will consistently be read from. Because mazel doesn't only mean a flow from above, it also means consistency. How do I know that it means consistency? Because the mazel is also a constellation in the sky. And when you talk about constellations, what you have is consistency. They're consistent. Unlike planets, they always move in the same direction, from east to west.
So the
Planets don't. Planets have regression. They go backwards. Okay. So the next night, you find them going backwards for a while, from west to east.
Which planet goes backwards?
All of them do. They have to.
Should we not be drinking?
What?
Should you not be drinking?
No.
I think they're backwards.
They go backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't know that they go backwards? They have to go backwards.
Why?
Because if the heliocentric picture of the solar system is correct, then there are times when you see retrograde motion because you're moving forwards and they're behind you. And so to you, it looks like they're moving
It's
backwards.
relative.
Of course, it's relative, but that's what you see in the sky. You actually see the movement. You see it moving backwards. You watch for a little while, it goes backwards.
You are going forward faster.
No, not because of that. Because again, you're on the opposite sides of the sun, so that's what it looks like. In any case, so mazel also means consistency, and in that sense, human beings are not very consistent. Right? Though we may have SOP, it's not so standard. Because one day you do like this, and one day you do like that. And
Not if you're a yeka.
Yekas are something else. They're close to angels. And they only have, but they also have very simple thoughts, as you know. It goes together. And it's not very complex thought. And doing everything very meticulously and cyclically, always the same. The truth is, we're yekas, we're able to take that quality and did have very complex thoughts, and they were able to cultivate both. But that exists everywhere, because that's the greatness of a human being, that you can include this complexity in you. And they're opposites. They have original thought, they have complex thoughts. It goes against the grain of being simple. But the greatness of the human being is that he can contain paradoxes. So even a paradox like this.
But in Chassidus, a person could be a great genius and a great Talmud Chacham and standing in a very high place, but he can be completely bottom. That's what we've been talking about. In Batel, Shifrus.
Yeah, there's very few people that are able to do this. Like it says about Rashbi. What was Rashbi's greatness? The greatness was that in spite of the fact that he was the most original thinker ever, and far more original than Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu received everything from Hashem. Rashbi had to invent it. Nonetheless, he was very meticulous in everything that he did. He was very makpid on everything that he did. It was very, very committed. And so a lot tried to do like Rashbi. What do you mean they tried to do like Rashbi? They tried to be original like Rashbi. And then says the Baal Shem Tov, and the Gemara says, and Baal Shem Tov explains, and then they lost what they could have had. It's easier to be committed and constant and trying to serve Hashem the same way every day than it is to be original.
It's better to be the tail of a lion than to be the head of a fox.
So there it says the head of the fox is it's cunning, it's smart. Tail of a lion, no. But what? It's consistent. It's always in the front. It's doing what it's supposed to do. The fox, you're right, is very cunning, but you don't get any consistency out of it. So there were few people who were able to do what Rashbi did, and most people lost their ability to be consistent when they tried to be too original. So that's why in Chabad, for instance, they always talk about order. The order is the meticulousness, it's the consistency. And there's a very strong element that I think runs very clearly through the lives of all the Rebbes, that they were very, very consistent. They didn't change things. And the Rebbe was maybe the best exemplar of it all. He didn't change anything at all from his from the Friediger Rebbe. Like in terms of conduct, he didn't change anything. The only thing he changed was the shtreimel. But I think that he got the previous Rebbe told him that it was okay to not wear a shtreimel.
Well, he wanted to give the Rebbe the shtreimel. It was hanging up in Mohammedina's.
Yeah, but I think that he told him that he doesn't have to.
She didn't want to give it to him.
Okay. And so what is this? What is this mazle? So here mazle, when you say that the part of the soul is coming down from above, okay, the higher part of the soul is flowing down from above. So here we mean the intellect. As he says in the Tanya. Remember, when this was said, the Tanya had just been published. Either it was just published or it was about to be published. Because the Jewish people are the thought of Hashem. What does it mean? כמו למשל באדם הגשמי, הנה מחשבתו מיוחדת בנפשו. והיו לאחדים יותר מדיברו שהוא דבר נפרד ויוצא חוץ ממנו, וידעו לחסום פיו ולשתוק, מה שאין כמבחינת המחשבה, כי הנפש מלאה אותיות. It says, thought, as opposed to speech, is more essential to the person. Because after you talk, it's out of you. It's left you. Also, you could stop. You don't have to talk all the time. You can be a little quiet. But you can't stop thinking. Okay? And if you stop thinking, you're ois mensch. You're not really a human being. A human being is constantly thinking. Because it's much more essential to the soul. It's much more essential to the run and return of life.
Stopping thinking is a vacuum. As soon as there's a
It creates a vacuum.
Then all flies.
Right. But not only is it a vacuum, but it's a sign that you're not alive entirely. Because if you're alive, then you think. Because because we said that the soul extends and expands into the body through the brain, through the mind. So if the soul's coming in, chayus, life is coming in, you would expect it to do something. So that's why you're constantly hitting the brain and causing it to think. And also there's a statement in Etz Chaim, and one that's quoted a lot. It's not said in Etz Chaim. Similar things are said, but this is a uniquely Hasidic statement that the soul is full of letters. Okay? What is a soul? What is a nefesh? It's letters.
We said the Malachim are made of letters as well.
Everything's made of letters.
No, we learned the Malachim,
But they're one letter.
when you see them, if you can see
One
them,
letter.
it looks like a walking letter.
A letter, just one. But the soul is made out of many letters, and they combine and they become something. Again, for the malachim to become a word, you have to get 3 malachim together. You have to get 3 angels together. Then you have a first letter, a second letter, a third letter. Now you have a verb. It's great. So now it becomes, it's called Maaseh Merkava. Merkava means you took a few angels together, like it was in the chariot that Ezekiel saw. What did he see? He saw 3 types of angels. One in Bria, one in Yetira, one in Asiya. The Srafim, and the Eifanim, and the Chayos HaKodesh. And you bring them all together. When you bring them all together, one from each world, now you get something that actually moves, has a nu'ah, has movement. But each one by itself, they don't move. So one of the simplest and straightforward and most correct interpretation, this is how most of the Kabbalists saw it, of the chariot, is that it's talking about Hebrew grammar. That's what it's talking about.
Oh, well.
Okay? That's all it means. It's not so complex. Or you could look at it the other way. This thing that we call grammar, which is not important and not everybody ignores, that's the chariot.
I don't understand.
You don't understand it? That's the chariot. That's what Hashem resides on. Yoshev Tehilot Yisrael. He rides on the words that are spoken. So by the angels, you have to get 3 of them together to get a word. By a human being, because the human being is complex, he's full of letters. His soul is full of letters. So every time that there's a little bit of life, there's a word. God is on this chariot. He's ready to go. No, the speech is just to say that the world that we inhabit, the way we see it, is relatively external and detached from God's essence.
But the speaking was done with letters.
So what? But first it was thought. First there's Allah b'machshava libarot. First it can be like thought. Again, it's all in parable, but saying first there had to be a thought. The thought contained all the letters, and the speech only contained a few of them. Like the Alter Rebbe just explained in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, that even though the letters of the 10 sayings that Hashem said in order to create the world, they contain some letters, they don't contain all the letters. So because they don't contain all the letters, how do you get everything that's in the world? So he says, it's all through letter substitution and this and that. Well, what do you mean to say? What do you mean to say is, if I would translate this into modern lingo, letters are
Lego building blocks.
right. Letters are for the 19th century, 18th century, what energy is for our times. Meaning today, I could use letters, and it's the best analogy in the end. Maybe it's even more than an analogy at some level. However, the modern mind doesn't get it. Say letters, energy, you understand. So I say, what? The type of energy that you get in a human being is very complex. There's no clean energy. It's not like human beings burn fuel. You don't burn anything inside. There's no fire inside. Even though the picture used to be, in the medieval, from Galen and on, actually, from the 3rd century and on, the picture of digestion, we talked about this once, was that you're burning something in your stomach. there's a fire burning, and you need to add fuel for the fire to burn. So
That's the liver.
liver doesn't burn anything. It doesn't even do chemical burning.
The liver breaks down. The
It
food.
breaks down. Breaks down is different from burning.
And releases the energy. It's exactly the same as taking a
Releases
piece
some of the
wood
energy.
and burning it, and then the elements come free.
Okay. But really what you're doing is you've got a whole chemical lab. And all you're doing is transformations. A lot of chemical processes going on. And the energy is not even produced anywhere in the liver. Where is the energy produced? In each cell by itself. Each cell has a mitochondria, has ATP, takes ATP, or it takes ADP, or turns it into the simple one. I don't remember what the monophosphate is called. And it all happens in cells. It doesn't really, there's no fire anywhere. But again, that was the picture. So today, if you want to explain this thing with letters being the basis of the universe and so on, and all these letter transformations and substitutions, we talk about energy. So energy changes. You start from energy from the sun, which is pure electromagnetic energy, kind of coming from a nuclear fusion reaction, and it reaches here, and then the plants take it, and and you've got all these energy transfers going on until you finally get to the person thinking. Okay? So it doesn't mention that man thinks. And it doesn't mention about the beetle. It doesn't mention about this. But these are all energy transfers that are happening in the same way that letters are transposed and changed and so on. I think for the modern mind, to call it energy is a lot easier than explaining letters. But the correct parable is letters. Okay? So man's soul is made out of letters. Or you would say today, it's energy. But the soul is not the simple energy. It's, as he said before, it's complex. But in any case, because, and now he's explaining why the soul is higher than the angel, because it is closer to the essence of the Almighty than the angel is.
Well, the Neshama is part of Kodesh Baruch Hu Atzmo.
Okay, it's closer. And Hashem contains everything. אלא שבהשתלשלות העולמות רבות ועצומות נשתלשל ונתפשט טהרת הנשמה להתלבש בגוף ונפש בהמית. But part of the descent of the world, of the evolution of the world, as we call it, ishtalshalus, is that the soul, or at least the light that comes out of the soul, the revelation of the soul, is enclosed in the body and the animal soul. ועודנה בכוחה לשלוט על הגוף ונפש הבהמית, להסיר רחמימות של ליבו ותענוגי העולם ותאוותיו מיסוד האש הטבעי, ולהיות גובר בו יסוד האש האלוקי שמשכנו בלב, להלהיב נפשו וליבו להיקלב ולהיבטל באחדותו יתברך. But still, as we said, even though there are two types of fire here, the fire that's coming from above, that's his soul, and the fire that's coming from below, that's his material passions. So there's still, the nature of it is such that the divine soul has the power to rule over the body and the animal soul's fires. Now this is a big, right away there's a big kasha with this. Because what is he saying in the Tanya?
I don't understand the last thing you said.
He says that if it's the soul as it's coming down, it has a lot more power than the passions coming from below. They're both fire, but the fire that's going to consume the fire is the fire coming from above. It's much stronger than the fire coming from below.
Okay.
But there's a big question when you say this, because in Tanya it says exactly the opposite.
The person is sometimes overtaken by the Yitzhak.
Not only sometimes, he says by nature, the animal soul is stronger than the divine soul. And lulei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ezro en yacholo. That if we're not for Hashem's,
we would never overcome.
okay, then you can't overcome the animal soul. But here he just gave the answer. The answer is that the divine soul coming down is really, it's the divine soul, But it's also, as he just said, it's Hashem's thought. So if it's in the state of coming down from its source, it's already including the help from Hashem. And more importantly, that the person doesn't experience it as himself. The divine soul is by its essence not experienced as the self. You feel it as a godliness coming down. That's why it's so much more rectified than the animal soul. Because what do you want? Let's say there's a person who's trained his animal soul to do everything that needs to be done. That's no guarantee that he's going to be serving Hashem. Because all he's doing is he's a creature of habit. He's doing what he's trained himself to do.
The dog is whooping him,
Good.
walking around his neck.
Good.
He's carrying the tray.
Right.
Until at such time something comes to distract him or tempt him.
But let's say nothing distracts him. He's so in charge of his animal soul. He's trained it so well, nothing can distract it. It will always do what it's supposed to do. Even such a person, according to Chassidus, is almost certainly not serving Hashem. Why? Because he's working out of habit. Who's he serving? He's serving himself. Habit becomes an idol. Habit becomes something that becomes self-serving. Right? You talked about yekim before, right? So sometimes you see that a person is such a yek that it drives everybody nuts. Why is it driving nuts? Because he's not flexible at all. Why are you not flexible? Because for him to break his routine is painful. So what is he doing by keeping up his routine? By going to shul in the morning?
He's keeping himself happy.
He's keeping himself happy. He's doing what he has to do in order to survive. Because that's how he's built himself. So the person, so even if you have the animal soul that's perfect, and it should be, and people get to that stage. It's not that it's not lacking in the world. There are hundreds of people in the world today who are creatures of habit when it comes to serving Hashem. They mamish do everything right. But that's not serving Hashem. They're serving themselves. Because you identify with it. But with the divine soul, you can't.
Move on from there to serve Hashem.
You can. But for that, you need to stop identifying with yourself. The divine soul, when it's coming from above, not after it's been extinguished, like we learned last week, but when it's coming from above, and it hasn't fallen into too low a place, the experience that a person has is that this is not me.
There's one major problem. I get messages all the time from the Nefesh Bahamis. I don't seem to get any messages from the Nefesh Elokis.
Why are you saying that?
Nefesh Bahamis all the time saying, go on with this, go and do that, go and have a nice ice cream, remember the shul, don't get out, stay in bed, and all this garbage.
I don't know. I think that every time you go, that's why tzedakah is so important. Gmilus chasadim is so important because you can't do gmilus chasadim with yourself. You can't do kindness to yourself. So what's the important thing to do?
Sure you do. You do it because you want to be a big guy.
Okay, so no, but you're right. There could be a lot of pride in it, a lot of gaiva in it. But there's a lot more chance that you're going to break routine when you deal with other people than when you deal with yourself. And dealing with other people places you in situations that are very uncomfortable. And
that's why you have to be so careful to say thank you to Hashem for every brush that comes in.
Right. Everything is a challenge. With other people, everything is a challenge. Very seldom is everything very hunky-dory and nice. It doesn't work that way. So there's more chances that you'll feel that Hashem is awakening you from above.
So you want to say that by seeing Hashgacha Pratis, for example, is actually getting a message from the Nefesh Elokis.
Hashgacha Pratis is the first sign that you see the Nefesh Elokis. It's the first sign. There's many other signs, but so that's why by the Baal Shem Tov it was so stressed that in our generations, acts of loving kindness are more important for a person's rectification than even learning or davening. Because learning or davening is usually done by himself, or at least one other person. It's very consistent. You don't have such great challenges. In the times of the sages, they knew how to learn at such a level that everything was a challenge. They could challenge themselves left and right. Our minds are very weak, relatively speaking. So we're not really challenged by what we find. We can live with everything. But with people, we can't live. People drive us nuts.
Right.
So the fact that a person drives you crazy, that's a good sign that you're not serving yourself.
Oh, so I should say thank you for my wife.
As I usually say to couples, she's the only person who's willing to drive you crazy, consistently. You should be thankful to your spouse. It's the only person in the world who's willing to stay with you, to drive you nuts consistently. You owe everything that you might become in this world through your divine soul to your interaction with somebody who's willing to stay with you in spite of the fact that you also drive them crazy. It's mutually beneficial, but it also comes out of a very deep commitment. That as tough as it gets, as much as we'll drive each other crazy, we still want this.
I have an important question.